I became an actor when I was a kid. I loved acting and got involved in theater in school and continued to study it, and also in the circus arts and other aspects of performance. Used to do circuses in the basement for the kids in the neighborhood. And I got my degree in theater at Towson University. I went to school with some of the best actors in the business, including Charles Dutton and guys like Dwight Schultz, who we all know as Madman Murdoch, and people like that. Got right out of school, was invited to be in my first off-Broadway show, directed by Paul Berman, who was the head of the department at Towson University when I was there. So I moved to New York and found myself after that show without a job and wanted to continue to make my living only as an actor. So I was in some comedy groups, sketch comedy groups and that kind of thing, always doing a lot of comedy, stand-up comedy, street performing. I used to probably make most of my money through the years in New York street performing in front of the Metropolitan Museum. And continued to hone my skills as an actor. Pretty much made a measly living living in New York, even when I had acting jobs. Theater never really paid that much. Probably made more money street performing at that time. And finally landed a role in a show called Three Guys Naked from the Waist Down, which was a musical about stand-up comics that I got off Broadway. It was Scott Bakula and myself and a guy named Jerry Colker who wrote the piece. And it was a big hit off Broadway. And I got approached by a talent scout who came to me, saw me in the show, and said, hey, we want you to be on this new show we have. This is 1985. This is at 84. And he says, we want you to be on our show, Star Search. And I said, well, what's that? Star Search, I haven't heard of this. They go, oh, it's a talent competition. And I was like, what is this, like Ted Mack's Amateur Hour? They're like, no, we have the best singers, the best actors, we have the best dancers and musicians, bands, and stand-up comedians. And we want you to come on as a stand-up. I go, well, I'm not really a stand-up comedian, right? This is just a part that I'm playing in the show. They said, well, you can win $100,000. And I said, so you can bleep that if you need to. Having come from street performing and sketch comedy, I started writing these bits, 2.5-minute bits for the show. I would do like the entire, Wizard of Oz in 2.5 minutes or whatever. I would do all kinds of characters and that kind of thing. And kept winning and secured myself a place in the semifinals and beat Rosie O'Donnell in the semifinals. And going on to the finals, I beat Sinbad in the finals and won $100,000. And the next thing I know, they're booking me on the road. I'm opening for the Temptations and the Four Tops in their TNT tour, and I'm opening for Rodney Dangerfield and Richard Belzer, and opening for Bobby Vinton and Lou Rawls and Harry Blackstone Jr., the magician, and all these different people. And I'm all of a sudden building a career in the television industry as a stand-up comedian and as a comedic actor. And got my first series. Called First and 10 on HBO. The series was on for 6-7 years. Starred myself along with O.J. Simpson was the
football,
right.
The football show.
And I played and Delta Burke was the owner of the team. I played the Bulgarian field goal kicker Zagreb Shkenuski, and I worked also recurring on Dream On, which was another HBO series. These were all the first cable series. These were all some of the first series on cable, and pretty popular series for their time. And got a call. My agents got a call and said, you know, we'd like John to come audition for Tales from the Crypt. And I knew what that was all about from the comic books, but I, you know, didn't know what they were doing series-wise. And they invited me down to Kevin Yeager's studio. And for those of you who don't know Kevin Yeager, he's the creature maker who designed Chucky and Freddy Krueger and all this wonderful stuff. He's also a great director and writer and all this stuff. But he was making the Cryptkeeper, and they invited me down to audition. So I went and auditioned for Kevin, and I did the voice you hear today as the Cryptkeeper. And next day he had me doing it for Joel Silver and Richard Donner in their office, and they gave me the part. So that launched my voiceover career in the Cryptkeeper. And everything else has just been a slow build and career over years. You know, I'm known as a versatile character actor. Well, playing Shemp in the Three Stooges was, of course, a great honor. I had originally auditioned to play Larry. I used to have all this, people who know my career, and I used to have this wild curly hair. And they thought of me for Larry. And when I came in and auditioned for them, they were like, great Larry, but we have so many choices for Larry. Larry's much easier to cast. We need somebody to play Shemp. Do you think you could do that? And I was like, oh, I loved Shemp as a kid. You know, Shemp was an interesting character. We had access to whatever family members were still alive. You could tell us some stories. We had home movies. We had a lot of different things. Mel Gibson was the producer of that movie, and he had access. You know, was able to get us access to a lot of really wonderful things in making that movie. We shot it in Australia in 2000, which was right after the millennium and right before the Olympics there. So we had an amazing time and a lot of time to prepare. And you know, I got to study all his film and footage, and he was a very neurotic, interesting guy. You know, didn't want to sleep in hotels because he was afraid of bed bugs and was afraid of animals. So he'd make him put panes of glass between him and the animals when they worked on film with them, and you know, didn't like being. At first, in the earlier days when the Stooges were with Ted Healy, he didn't like being smacked around by Ted Healy so much, and thought that the Stooges had, you know, a bigger future than that. You know, Mo was a little more willing to settle with what they had and didn't want to make waves, and so, you know, Shemp went off on his own, and that's when they brought Curly in. It's a great story. You get a chance to watch it. I think it's on Netflix. I think it goes under Three Stooges 2000, but it's just a fantastic story and was handled really well. I'm really excited to be at Crypticon here in Seattle. I love the city, love the people. You know, it's really nice to come to a convention and meet fans. Tales from the Crypt was something that I enjoyed as a comic book as a kid, so it was really kind of exciting for me to have the opportunity to be on the series. You know, and who knew it would become such a huge, you know, iconic show. If you had asked me back in the day if kids were watching Tales from the Crypt, I would have been like, no effing way are kids watching this show. You know, it's scary, it's creepy, it's fun. You know, it's definitely it's supposed to be, you know, fun and winked at, very tongue-in-cheek and that kind of thing. But now, of course, I've found out that all these kids were watching Tales from the Crypt. Some people's parents let them watch it. Some people well, you know, will tell me, oh, it's the only show. You know, my parents wouldn't let me watch it, but my grandpa did. So I was sitting there, I watched it with my grandpa every week, or it's the only show my whole family watched together. You know, my parents wouldn't let me watch it if I didn't do my homework, or my parents threatened to make me watch it if I didn't do my homework for the kids that were afraid of it. I mean, it had so much history during that time for kids. So the people who are now young adults who grew up with this show are, it's more iconic for them than it ever even was for me. And I'm very fortunate, you know, in a 34-year career, you're lucky if you have anybody that remembers anything. I could probably spout you off a TV series that I did, and you probably may have heard of Only First and 10 or a couple of the other ones. You know, so to do something like Tales from the Crypt that's iconic, and have an appreciation for the show as being a great show, but also know that there's fans for it, and that I can come and spend time with them and give back to those fans, is a great thing, So I enjoy horror. I loved I was especially fond of the Universal horror monster movies when I was a kid. So to go to horror conventions is fun for me in the first place, although I don't get to spend as much time exploring it as the fans do, because I'm sitting there greeting fans myself. But, it's an exciting time to be able to do that. And now it's that show has a bigger fan base than it ever did.